Yes, thank you. So the whole Krusen cluster is separated into two phases. So the first one, Krusen 1, has just been commissioned, as you mentioned. The second phase, Krusen 2, is made up of two wind farms and one solar plant, more or less half and half. It's about 520 megawatt. And that is owned by Envusa Energy, which is a 50-50 partnership between EDF and Anglo American, a trader aggregator company that was formed a few years ago. And so they own those projects. They're also the off-taker of those projects. They plan to aggregate the energy and sell it onto a number of mining companies. And so those projects are slated to end the construction shortly. I think where we've brought quite a lot of innovations recently is in one of the projects that we have under construction called Umuilanga, which is really a hybridization of three different technologies, wind, solar and batteries, into a virtual power plant. And the idea there is to create kind of on-demand power. And that's really something that we think is going to become more and more important as the South African market evolves, as the penetration of renewables and of variable sources of power increases in the network. The equation between matching supply with demand is going to be key. And that's kind of one of the tenets of the South African wholesale electricity market and the whole market code, to have these balanced responsible parties on both sides to be able to match demand and supply. And you can do that at a plant level, like we've done, by hybridizing and by having these very accurate kind of predictions of what your renewable energy plant will produce and what your customer will need. But you can also do that, like we're doing through Envusa, by aggregating various sources of power and balancing different loads that you have, so different kind of power loads that you have at your different plant level. So in South Africa, I think one of the main challenges that all IPPs are facing at the moment is around grid. I think you'll hear that from a lot of my peers. What has happened is that there's been a fairly important rollout of renewables over the past decades that has created sources of power where it used to be sources of load, and the grid isn't really set up to manage power coming from areas where usually load was kind of pulling electricity from. And so the grid needs to be reconfigured. You need to build new transmission lines, substations need to be strengthened, etc. And that takes time. It also takes investment. And so Eskom is driving, or rather the NTCSA, which is the transmission component of Eskom Holdings, which is going to be unbundled, is in the process of being unbundled, is driving the strategy of which areas need to be strengthened from a grid perspective, what transmission corridors need to be rebuilt, which new substations need to be set up. So they have been rolling that out themselves. I think what's been interesting is that last year it was announced that the private sector would also be invited to build some of that transmission network through a new program called the Independent Transmission Program, the ITP. EDF Power Solutions is one of the 7 entities that's been shortlisted to participate in that program. So it's something that isn't new globally. A few other countries have done it, and it's, we think, a great way to accelerate investment into something that is really critical, infrastructure development in grid. So hopefully this starts happening, well, so the bid will happen this year, hopefully, and construction should be able to kick off in 2027. Other challenges that exist, I think, are around really policy execution in South Africa. I mean, I think in Africa as a whole, but in South Africa, I think you have generally good policies. They are conducive to investment. They're conducive to investment in renewable energy specifically. However, there are pitfalls sometimes in how the policy gets implemented. For instance, the public tenders for wind in particular haven't been very successful. It's a challenge. I think that the policy and the general vision is in place, but the institutions need to be strengthened probably, and need to be able to follow a pace that is supposed to accelerate quite drastically. And maybe one last point I wanted to mention about the kind of challenges that I think we'll start facing as we ramp up both the development of transmission infrastructure and renewable energies, is that I don't think the construction sector as a whole is ready for that level of ramp up today. It's been eroded over the past decade for various reasons, and it needs to be rebuilt, and that entails investing in SMMEs, bringing or developing skills at various levels, and it requires also large construction companies to refinance themselves, be able to issue the guarantees, etc. So we need to get that kind of cycle going again, and it can't happen overnight, and it needs kind of long-term investment into skills development and investment in companies. Yes, at a company level, as EDF, Africa is really a key focus region because of the growth we see on the continent, and because renewable energy really is at the nexus of providing the support for developing nations and decarbonizing. So a lot of African countries still rely a lot on diesel and coal generation, and there's a real opportunity as the demand for power increases to kind of transition rapidly into cleaner, safer, cheaper forms of power. So at a company level, Africa is really a key market. Now, we are selective in the countries we operate in. There are a number of countries that we've been in historically that will continue to develop. South Africa is one of them, Morocco, Egypt, etc. And we use a variety of technologies that, depending on the specificities of each country. So we do hydro in some countries. We're developing large projects in Southern Africa. We do wind and solar where those resources are available. Battery storage is a component that is looked at pretty much in all jurisdictions, and also biomass. So these are really the kind of technologies that we focus on. And I mean, just to give you an example of how the growth has happened for us, I think between 2024 and the end of this year, we will have multiplied by 5 the amount of installed capacity that we control.